Good morning, everybody. It is Explicit Measures, a Thursday episode. Tommy and Seth, good morning. How are things going?
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Mike. Loving the beard still.
We're trying to grow it in. For those of you who are listening online, you can see it's winter time, and if you see my profile picture online, there's this really large beard on me, and I like that picture. But during the summers, I shave it off. It's too hot, so we're now entering. It was 50 degrees when I woke up this morning, so it's getting a little bit cooler. I'm able to start growing in the beard again, so we're gonna try it again for this year. This will be like the third year straight. Maybe 1 year it'll just stay on all year round.
I'm a fan of your beard, Mike.
I love the beard.
Well, thanks, guys. That makes two of you.
Full supporter. Just in case you're getting flack from somebody else.
Not the one who matters. Yeah.
Yes, there's someone in our family who gives me flack for the beard. The wife does not thoroughly enjoy the beard. But today we're going to talk a little bit less around. I mean, this will probably be very relevant to Power BI topic things. Our topic today, we don't really have an intro. We were kind of talking beforehand and didn't have any new key insights that we're going to throw at you from an informational standpoint today for introductions. However, though, we're going to talk about communication skills and why they're important. And I don't think this is. I think it's a topic that maybe is either underrated or I don't think we can stress how important this really is. How important communication skills are, and maybe just we're going to talk through some areas today around how we've gotten to where we are in communication skills, and maybe some ideas around how you can get involved. And if you feel like you want to communicate more or become a better communicator about what you've learned, things you're doing, whatever that may be, I think it actually serves you really well in all your positions in your career. It's a valuable skill, I think. So Tommy, kick us off. Maybe give us some of your thoughts on this.
I just put some posts out on the internets, just on a few thoughts, because I always like to kind of research my repository of articles and resources for what we're talking about. And I was trying to do a deep dive on what has been written or discussed or talked about in the business intelligence world, because I had to expand my search outside of just Power BI, and also that relationship between effectively communicating or working with someone other than another BI professional, or working with other than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it was pretty barren, the resources out there. And from user groups to all the resources out there on what your skills are and what you need to learn, the communication aspect is not talked about at all. And I think that's why we're kind of talking about it today, because even though it's not something that's really a lot of resources are out there on what it means and why it's important,
Yes,
we all know how important it is, because it's almost one of those things where you may be the best technical person in the world, but you will always be limited, and this is my opinion, but you'll always be limited in your career growth and also your ability to do your job successfully if you cannot effectively listen, communicate, talk about data, and understand the needs of a user. So to me, like, this is almost not more important than being able to do Power Query and do DAX.
sure.
But it's absolutely on the same spirit of me.
Yeah. And this is not a Power BI specific thing either.
Right.
And I would also echo, this is not. I think when we talked about the topic initially, I think my first run at this was like, are we? I was thinking communication like I'm presenting something to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was my initial thought. But now as you're mentioning that intro, Tommy, I'm thinking about other areas that are also very well used for communication. And one of them I would say I definitely have improved in. I'm not a good writer. I'll just say that right out front.
Mm-hmm.
When I started doing the blog a long time ago, I was not very good at articulating my thoughts. And so just by doing the Gutenberg editor that WordPress gives you, and then there is actually a Yoast plugin that you can use that actually helps you shorten your sentences and tries to SEO optimize part of your language and wording so more people stay on your page. And in using those tools, I was able to learn a different way of speaking or writing, actually. So my writing, I think, is very different now. And when I have young bloggers or other people who are blogging on our website that are not as many years of experience, I read through it and go, oh, I see these are things that I used to do when I started out. I did a lot of you, and I used a lot of it's, and like when you take it and move it over here, like I did a lot of words that, and I was like, well, actually, it's clearer if you write out the full words and you make shorter sentences. And I stopped using and as much and tried to make less of a long sentence and shorter sentences. So I think there's also a maturity there as well. Seth, what do you think? What are your thoughts on communication and how that plays in the workplace?
I'm excited when we were, rounding around this topic,
Rounding around,
yeah.
we were going to
circling around the topic, maybe.
Right.
Communication skills, people, 101.
Maybe this is not the podcast.
Try to.
Know when to schedule your podcast. It will help with brain function. For me, recently a lot, right? Watching YouTube shorts and all these, different things, and I was seeing a lot of these little quick quotes where, people like Warren Buffett, like when he was talking to college students, what is the most important thing he stresses? Is it investing? Is it finance? Like, no, it's he says, go take a communication class, go take marketing. Like, one of the best things that you could do for yourself is learn how to effectively communicate with people.
Yep.
And recently started reading a book by John Maxwell, who's a leadership coach with many, #1 bestsellers. Everyone communicates, but few connect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because we're talking doesn't mean that we're connecting with the people, with our audience. And all of that, kind of combined into this reoccurring thing that you hear from successful people, online or wherever, is being able to clearly articulate an idea or convince somebody of something requires that you're engaged with them. And that's the communication aspect of this, right? So
yeah,
we can take that on a high level, right? In the many different audiences, active listening, maybe that's an entirely different podcast, right? Because that's just as effective as communicating, or part of it. But I think we can all learn to do this better. And I think based on just the conversation that we started having, I'm excited for, where this podcast goes, because, ultimately I think each of us, as we progress, through our lives, if we learn how to communicate well with people and articulate our ideas better, you are going to be more successful. And one of the interesting things around all of, this listening and hearing and reading is, for me, was the fact that it's not always the smartest people that are making, really big jumps in their careers. It's the people that are communicating effectively.
And
Man,
so
strong.
I threw
That is strong.
I threw the link of the book for those who may want to read it. And if you have read it, if anyone has read this book who's listening to the podcast or addressing this live, please throw us a line on the comment thread if you found it useful, if you like the book. Seth is reading through it now for his organization, and it has kind of 4 key bullet points. Communication goes beyond words. 2, find common ground. 3, keep it simple, say it slowly, and have a smile. I will say a smile goes a long way when you
I
don't
can
know
learn that one.
Seriously, that goes a long way. I think when you're looking at someone and they're smiling at you.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually a really interesting note there. And then 4, the inspiration equation. I don't really know what that means, but you got to read the book apparently.
You got to read the book.
So yeah, it seems really. And so another one I'll point out here. And this is a buzzword. I think a buzzword is just kind of in this is called emotional intelligence. How do you handle difficult situations? How can you use your words in a good way? And one thing I'll bring up here's a personal thing. So my wife and I, whenever we're discussing things, there's like I have these ideas, and I'm more of the dreamer in the family. So I kind of come up with these really grandiose ideas, and my wife doesn't always see it as good ideas. She's more of a realist, we'll call it. And Seth's actually a very good realist as well. So I'll come up with super crazy ideas, and this is a good thing, especially in our Power BI professional relationship. I'll come up with these super crazy ideas, and Seth's like, that's a good idea, but we need to refine parts of it. There's a couple things that are just too far out there. And Tommy, you're a dreamer too. Tommy's a dreamer guy. So
compare from personal relationships, there's a different dynamic. No, but continue. Yes.
Yeah. But So in some of these cases, like I come out with these crazy ideas, and so I get this little bit of dose of reality, and I have to come back, kind of come back to this. But one of the phrases that my wife uses a lot is I'm very driven to have some of these ideas come through, and so there's a phrase that goes around the Carlo household: Michael gets what Michael wants. So because I push and I work and I get hard, I really drive for that thing. So I, if I can't get to the idea exactly the way I want it to, I'll compromise and I'll try to tweak the idea so we can figure out how to make that thing work. And so that's a part of the reason why you'll see in my video, there's a whole bunch of really large Lego sets on top of here because Michael saves up and, I don't go buy a bunch of clothes. I buy a bunch of expensive Lego sets to go build and models and such. So
I love it when you start talking about yourself in the third person.
that's true. That's true.
When you know it's serious.
That's when you know it's serious.
We're getting down to getting down into
into the emotional internal parts there.
There was a previous conversation about that in the past. That's what we know.
Mm-hmm.
So let me take that in terms of, because like I said, I think all of us are pretty driven in being the dreamer kind of thing. Taking that down on a level in terms of for what we do. We had this conversation actually after our previous podcast offline.
Yep.
We were talking about, the role of someone in Power BI, where we are more of the customer service. More often than not, people are coming to us with a need, with a request, with something for support. Like, what is this data? I need a report. What is this showing? We need a solution.
Yes.
And, so that's kind of like our role usually in an organization. There's a leadership aspect to it, but at the most part, we are in a sense
that.
Always we're not the client. Like, we serve clients,
sure,
even if it's internal. Where do you see for like at least a Power BI professional, someone who's maybe first thinking about this for the first time, what aspects in the day-to-day life of a Power BI professional would you say like communication really stands out and most important?
So go ahead, Seth. I think you're going to jump in there. Go ahead.
No, that's a great question. I think if we're talking coworkers, right? So one is who's the audience? Let's just assume it's the technical person. Tommy, is that fair, or is it the business user, right?
So and it could anyone who's coming to the person building.
I think the 2 points that stand out to me as far as you're that person you've never really thought about communication are what is the personality of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that, for some context, is one of the best things I ever went through in my life was a training course called Insights, where they take your personality types. I mean, there's a bunch of different flavors of this, but they roll it into different blocks: red, blue, yellow, green, and each of those is a quadrant. And after you take this course, you get this like full on personality test. But the great thing about it was everybody in the organization had these bricks. And you could walk up to somebody and you would know, is the individual like me, where we're talking work, man. I'm red, blue, like I'm the bullet list, or am I walking into somebody's office who's yellow, green, which is these are the people that want to know, how are you doing?
That's me.
Like,
I'm a yellow.
I need to engage with you first. Like, let's break the ice. Let's talk for a few minutes. And understanding, just like thinking about the personality types of my coworkers was mind bending, because I found myself changing my delivery to be a better communicator. Like, I wanted to roll into the office and come out with an answer, right? Or I want to send an email that's like, we had this meeting, here's the bullet items, like fill in the bullet item answers. But that, like, some people don't operate that way. They find it offensive, too direct. And if you're trying to be communicated, like connect with people and communicate effectively, you're going to alter your style of how you interact with those individuals. So do you need the bricks? No. Like, you can probably figure out who's the person who wants to, chat it up, like spend some more time, invest in, rather than look at that time as wasted, look at that time as, the time where you can engage with them, figure out what you need to communicate, and then get an answer back. So I think personalities first and foremost, like figure out what your coworkers are and the best way to interact with them.
That's a great observation. I really like that one. And I went to the same training that Seth did on this one, and it's 100% true. Like, I really like to come in and just say hello, how's it going, a little bit of light talk. I wanted to connect emotionally a little bit before I started jumping into like the details of like, okay, let's talk about SQL Server. Okay, let's talk about building Power BI reports. But Seth was more of like, distill it for me. I don't need fluffy words. Like, get me right to like, good morning. All right, let's talk technical. Like, let's get into like, well, I'm ready to go. Like, I don't need a whole bunch of extra run up, and that I think it's partly because just our personalities. I thought it was a very helpful program to go through, and would recommend. So I just threw the link in the chat window. Insights.com I think is the website, but it really talks to like how do you gauge other people, and then knowing what your workers are. And to Seth is saying these bricks things. I want to explain the bricks so people know what that means. When we went through the class you went through, you were able to get these little foam bricks, and there's like colors that are that you get that are kind of speaking to your personality. I don't remember all of them. I think the yellow one was the one I related to the most, but it was more around like, I like to have emotional connection. I like to, make sure that I'm accepted. And there's like some things in there that are of that emotional yellow color. And then the reds were more like, it's my way or the highway. Like, we're going to get in, let's write down the plan. Let's get A, B, C done.
Get it done.
Get it
You
done.
end up painting yours like maroon red.
Yeah, exactly. So the idea is you take these little Lego foam bricks and you would kind of rearrange them for like how you're feeling for the day. So you'd have like, I'm not feeling very red today. I'd put my red brick on the bottom of my little stack, and I would put the yellow or the green one like at the top of the stack or something like that. I don't remember. Or you only got.
That's why I was so confused.
I don't know. But a funny story though around this is some individuals left the company and their bricks stayed. So Michael snuck by their cubicle and would grab all their extra bricks, and I started making the leaning tower of emotional bricks on my desk. And so people would come by my desk and like, how did you get so many bricks? I'm like, these are the souls of the employees who have left the company. Because I'd have like, I had literally like a huge stack, and it was probably like 1.5 feet tall of just brick stacking on my desk from people who had moved on, or people who had gone through the training. They're like, I don't want these bricks anymore. And they just kind of like got left around.
Who knew the segue of your Legos behind you?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Into the...
Yeah.
So that's what the bricks were. The bricks were meant to communicate like your type of personality for other people, so they could just at a glance know this is how Mike operates. This is how Seth operates.
So yeah, if I did that, I would find a green, a white, and a red one. So he's passionate, he's quick,
he's Italian,
and he's always hungry.
Oh, he's always hungry. Bring him pasta before you talk to him.
Yeah, exactly. So that I love what you guys just said, because about like the different personalities. I think it starts there. I took it when we had the conversation a little more one level down, because we're dealing with data too, which I think really adds a knot into this whole conversation, because not only do you have people with different personalities, someone who is, wants that more of that connection, someone who wants more, just give it to me straight, give me the bullet points.
Yep.
But then you also have people who, how comfortable they are with certain aspects of data. I ran into this early in my Power BI career, where when we have either meetings on building a report or conversations about an existing report, I was so knee deep in the technical side where these meetings would go, okay, so what are you looking for in the report? Do you want sales? What dimensions do you want? And you just got from a few of the higher ups, like just this wide-eyed look like, because they were so uncomfortable with data. And it was even worse when we were trying to communicate an existing report on what are the numbers showing. It's like, well, it's up 15%. And if you actually look here, I'm going a million miles a minute showing a report. And then you look at the person, and it would almost been better if we didn't show the report at all.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, why don't they understand? I'm saying this directly, saying it straightforward. Well, some people are just not comfortable. They don't need, if they see 4 visuals, they are overwhelmed.
Yes.
Because, and again, for me to think like that's okay, like for people to be that way, but it's like, no, this is simple. Look, it makes sense. But understanding, you have to go in with not only understanding personalities,
I like this,
but understanding people's, their, how they comprehend data, where they're at in terms of
analytically where they're at.
Yeah, analytically, and
because we're all in different places, and so
right.
You and I, and like we also have to think about like how other people are perceiving our reports. Like, so there's, this is funny because this speaks to like the point that I was talking about earlier. Earlier I was saying about blogging and how that affected my communication skills. But to your point, you're saying, Tommy, is the report itself is also communicating
Yeah.
something. And so as report authors, and this is I think a good dovetail here of like not only are we communicating, like explaining and talking to people like here's how the report works. These are the things
Mhm.
you click on. But additionally we're saying, hey, this is what this chart means, and maybe having additional chart elements. And I think that one of the things that Seth and I agree with this one a lot. When you show someone a report page, it's not always intuitive to them what they're going to be able to click on,
Right.
or what does that chart mean, or what are you trying to show with that chart. You can have 3 different people look at a chart a different way and pull up maybe a different type of insight. So it's good to communicate like with an information pop-up window, or have a button you press where some like text shows up and says, I'm going to explain to you what this chart is trying to
Right.
do. And then, if it's, we've got a goal line here. What's that orange dotted line in the middle of the graph doing? Well, that's the target. We're trying to make it to that point. And if you talk to someone about the chart, they understand it. But you also are sometimes putting reports into a place where I make a report. It's just getting stuck out on an app somewhere. And
Right.
are they going through the training? Are they not? And so something we've done in the layouts that Seth and I have built or created on Power BI Tips is we have like an information page or a how-to page. We have like 5 or so videos of like
Mhm.
how to use a drill through, how to use a hierarchy, how to just some general helps along that, and have little icons and describe like, hey, this is what this means, and here's a video to show you how to do it, kind of thing. So like other things like that
Yeah.
as well is also very relevant.
Well, let me take that one quick step further. Where
Sure.
when the first white paper that I think Melissa Coates did, the first white paper on the governance and adoption of Power BI, it was a Word document,
Mhm.
and you could download, and it was basically talking about like how to actually scope and build a report with the user. And I said, great, this is my framework I'm going to use.
Yeah.
So with some, I would go into these meetings with this list of like, okay, what functionality do you want, kind of thing. Like what are the business rules, and I would just be so technical and trying to build it, and you would have someone go, I just want to see how my sales team's doing.
Yeah.
And that was such a conversation I had with my boss at the time.
Yep.
And it's something I had to really overcome, because you had to literally not just change the ability to listen, but you had to change the way what words you use and really dumb it down.
Yes.
And then, not to go off too much in a tangent, and then being able to translate that dumbed down version, so to speak, into the actual report requirements.
Right.
So
I think this entire conversation is exactly, I think, what we mean by know your audience. Right.
yeah,
I think if I would distill what that means in terms of action
Yeah.
for people, it would be everything you guys described, and the focus that the more we learn, especially because if you're heavy in Power BI, like you're riding this line of business and engineering, right? And like a lot of the things that you're learning are deep technical knowledge pieces that start to become part of your vocabulary. So
Mhm.
you're always going to be on a more granular level in how you can describe things. And it makes sense when we're talking to other people that we talk about the details, or technically we want to talk about some of the challenges of like how we did something or we didn't. But the reality is, if knowing your audience is how much do I need to distill
Mm.
what I know to like the thing they need to understand. And that is a thought process that you
Yeah.
have to go through yourself.
Yep.
To clearly articulate to that person what it is that they're trying to understand, right? If it's your coworker in Power BI, you don't have to change anything.
Yeah, you can talk much
If
deeper
Right.
it's
about things. Yeah.
if it's the business user, maybe you need to change 90% of it, right? To your example there.
Yeah.
And then if you're in the executive realm, what is deliverable? Like how does your description of things meet them where
Yeah.
where they need to be?
Mhm.
And that takes a lot of you just thinking about like, how do I distill and summarize this nugget of information, because I always have the detail in my back pocket, right?
Yes, exactly.
But I think the challenge that many of us, all of us have, is being in the right frame of mind to articulate the right things to the right audience,
Mhm.
because you're assuming they know what you know, and you should actually be assuming the opposite. You should
Yep.
assume they don't know anything about what you're talking about,
Yeah.
because in reality, that's probably more often than it. And then you throw out one word and you start freaking people out because they don't understand what filter context is. Well, they
Or
shouldn't have to,
or they just
right?
nod their
Like,
head and say, "Yep, I know what you're
yep,
talking about,"
yep,
and
Which is
we
worse.
nod and move
right,
on. And
right.
instead of actually someone raising their hand and saying, "I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Can you
Yeah.
please explain what that means?"
How many
Right.
people are willing to do that? And
Yeah.
the answer is low. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
not many people are like, I don't get what you're talking about. Can you please explain that further?
Exactly. You don't want to
Yeah.
look like a
Yeah.
goofball in the
Yeah.
media and be like, I don't know I don't know what you're talking about.
Seth, it really does start there. Know your audience. Like,
Yeah.
I think it starts there. I mean, so I think for some of our reports, we can build it. And for some people, all they want to know is, how's it doing? Great. And that's what the report, like, that's all you need to communicate. They may never even look at the report
Yep.
in terms of like, but all they need to know is your team's doing good. Talk to Jim.
Well, yeah.
And that's all they need to know, because it starts with, who are you talking to? They don't care what a data model is. Some people do. Yeah.
I think this is also why you will see, like we've talked about this a number of times, but I start with this technique of tell me the insights. Like
Mhm.
I think you can always frame these conversations around, as far as communication, like tell me what you need to get done. What is the action? So I'm going to go work on sales data, or I'm going to go work on marketing data, whatever that is. It's high level. Let's just have like one or two key bullet points. What does this report need to do? Like, what actions do I want to take after looking at this? Do I want to change my spending? Do I want to go, talk to my team and ask them to do different things? Do I need to go tap people on shoulders and say, sales are down? We got to do something here. So like, if there's a conversation you need to have after you look at this report, tell me what that conversation should look like. Tell me what that insight or action is going to be driving, and then we work kind of backwards from that and say, okay, now what can we put in front of you that helps you make that action happen?
Mm.
And I think that makes it a much more effective and concise report. And you stop talking about like, oh, can you just give me a big table with lots of columns? That way I can export to Excel and dig through the data for hours and hours. That's really not the point of what we're trying to do with Excel. Like that, Power BI, we're trying to give it to you kind of like pre-aggregated, like, and a lot of times, I mean, Seth and I talk about this all the time, but like we want it to be like, it's going up. It's a green arrow up. It's a red arrow down. It's a line going up. It's a line going down. Red and green. Like we're trying to do things that are very simple in nature, and by just looking at the page, it just kind of tells you where to focus your information or your time.
On the other side of the coin, just as important as the ability to speak and use the words is also the ability, I think, to listen. And I think that is absolutely part of the communication, where you need to be able to take how people are going to word it, where again, they may be technical, they may know their business, or they may be overwhelmed, but take whether it's, again, outside of just even building a report, but just in general, take how they word it, how they communicate, and being able to translate that both from, I need to map this out technically, but I also need to understand how they're saying this and what it means.
Yes.
And I think that, Mike, you've said like it's emotional intelligence.
Yeah, I think so.
If someone's coming to you, the part of the communication is being able, in a sense, process and then spit back out.
Yes. I do a lot of communication, and this is something you learn in like when you start going to like communication training pieces. So one thing I did is I went in one of my past career moves was sit in a large group of people and actually learn how to present, going through like formal training around presentation stuff. And one of the things they do there is in order to communicate clearly, you let people tell you things, and then you'll say, I'd like to recap what I just heard to make sure I understood what you said. And so I'll come back with you said you need to do this, this, and this, and here's why you need to do these things, or kind of like regurgitate back and like communicate back to them what you thought you heard, because then they have a moment to clarify. I'm like, no, that's not quite right. Let me help you. Let me rephrase it a little bit differently, because not everyone's going to say it right the first time.
Right.
So it's a little, to your point, Tommy, right? It's a lot about listening. And I think this is another part where we say empathy is a good portion of this. I need to see it from your perspective. Like it's so hard to get to this data, and I'm always getting these Excel sheets. I'm very overwhelmed. Like there's words that they're using that are indicating to you like, okay, a data model would really help here because we could automate all that. So you just put these Excel files in SharePoint, and then we hit refresh. You go get your coffee and come back, and the data's ready to go. Or the data's always coming in dirty, or the Data format's always changing. There's things in there that you're listening for, and then you come back and say, okay, I'm hearing you say, this is how the data is coming in. This is the problems you're having with it. I can help you address those things, and here's what we think we should talk through next, kind of thing. So I think that's a really good point.
That's the reiteration of things to make sure everybody's on the same page. Love that.
Did you just reiterate what I was just saying there?
Yeah.
Oh.
The empathy.
If I can repeat that.
I want to hammer on the empathy part, though, right? Because
Yeah.
really, what we're saying when we say know your audience,
Yeah.
right? Or how do you key in, to what somebody is explaining they need in a report? That's what we're saying. We're saying practice empathy. Right? Like lock into where that person is and try to meet them there.
I saw an interesting quote on Twitter. I think it was Twitter. And I think it was Win from an MVP. Win MVP was talking about, remember, today's the first day that someone has just learned about Power Query. And I thought, someone's having a good day right now. Because I remember my first moment of Power Query. I was kind of overwhelmed, but then on the other hand, I was like, man, this has got a lot of potential. And so me being what I would call myself the lazy engineer, a good engineer is a lazy engineer. Do it once, do it right, and don't ever do it again, kind of thing. I will spend a little extra effort automating what I do because I don't want to have to come back tomorrow and do the same steps over again. So I thought that was a really interesting comment that went along with that word there. But to that end, right, we have to remember that there's always people coming into this Power BI space, and Tommy used the word all the time, as a Power BI pro, right? We're the professionals.
I know how much you love that. Yes.
Oh, I love that word because we have a pro user and a pro license.
Yes, I know.
We're professionals.
You're not going to confuse me again. I'm sticking to it. So.
I'll just adopt it and move on.
Okay.
So as a Power BI pro or professional, we're kind of like a help desk, and particularly from our careers, right? We're the guys who know a lot of things about Power BI, and we can pretty much walk into any organization. There's going to be very few people in there that know as much as we know and all the detailed things that we've done. Like we've built so many parts to this. And we've actually Gary V, a guy Seth, I think you follow on YouTube or whatever, but he's like, if you're in the career mode to make money, you're not going to make it. But if you're in it because you're passionate about the thing that you like to do, you will be successful because there's going to be grit. There's going to be hard times. And so I think all of us have said, we just love this stuff. We would have done this if this wasn't Power BI. This would be some other automation tool thing that we would have just stood behind. And, we may not have been friends because we would have gotten to those paths a different way. But, the Power BI ecosystem, the community that's there is super passionate, and there's something crazy about like this Excel business user centric community that there's a lot of really fun people here, and I just enjoy talking with other professionals. But walking into businesses, being that leader, you have to remember you're coming in as someone who's going to be doing a lot of training and teaching other people, because a lot of people have never heard of filter context. They've just self-taught themselves this. They haven't gotten formal training from Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari in SQL BI. So there's a lot of core concepts. Like I'll say star schema, and people are like, I kind of like facts and dimensions. Does that make sense? Unless you come from like a SQL space, those are more common terms that are used from an IT or SQL DBA person. So I have to do a lot of like, okay, this is why we do this. This is how you do this, and how you build these different models. So anyways, those are some really good points for me to internalize. Is we have to continually act like a support desk, a help desk, and keep remembering when we show up at these meetings, we're always doing a lot of teaching. And I think for me, one of the major points that I'm talking right now a lot about is Power BI is a framework. It can't do everything. So there's distinct limitations with Power BI. There are workarounds for a lot of this, but it also turns into how much money you want to spend on figuring out the workaround solution, or we just don't do that thing that you wanted, and we just build you what Power BI can do out of the box. Do you want speed, or do you want it correct to what your vision is? So if we can refine, if we can shape your idea of how the report should work a little bit, we're then able to implement something much quicker than if we have to do like really custom, like I'm really going to customize this table with CSS and okay, time out. Power BI is not great at that. Let's just stick with these standard table designs. Let me see if I can stylize it for you, and we'll go from there.
Right on.
Um, what are we talking about again? Well,
you
as
you
a
feel
leader,
better, Mike?
yeah,
I feel better.
I need to let that out.
I need to let that out.
I need to communicate that. So I do want to harp on the thing you said about the service and the support desk. And think about when you call someone from support. And I think I haven't realized this until probably the last few months, but if someone's coming to the BI team, how do they perceive you? Or maybe the better way to say that is, how do they want to perceive you? Like if I'm going to support, if you've ever called Xfinity, right? Because your internet's out.
Oh boy.
If you get someone like, hello, yeah, is the most frustrating thing compared to someone's like, yeah, we'll help you. Having confidence and also being able to, again, like you said, reiterate, but it's also our tone. It's
Yep.
also the way that we're being a leader, or at least perceiving the attitude that we know what we're talking about. If we go in like literally like phone support, that like we can't be that, even though what we do is so technical. People are coming to us because they want, in a sense, I don't want to say comfort, but they want to see confidence. Like they know what they're talking about. They're going to help me solve this problem. No one's coming to us because they don't have a problem,
Sure.
even if it's not perceived as a problem. I'll give an example. So we've done like a scoping on, we're building a kind of a platform report, Power App, kind of the whole shebang around the process being done right now. And we're kind of going through all the tasks that have to be done or currently being done, all the systems, all the tasks like that are done between the sales, between product. And, we're kind of, it's a very, just like anything, it's a very intricate business process. But the ability that I've learned to, like you said, want to reiterate what someone's saying, like just to make sure what you said, but also being able to leave those conversations, because a lot of times we're usually, the calling card in a meeting. Like if someone schedules a meeting with us, more often than not, we're not the ones in the background. We have a lot of talking to do and a lot of listening to do.
Yeah.
So I think part of that communication is, how are you perceived? Are you being a voice of leadership? Or are you being a voice that he knows the path that we're going to be taking? So like it's a difficult dance to do, because one, you have to understand listen to the words that they're saying. Two, you have to translate that, write it down, and understand how are you going to be able to map this. Does this make sense? This is going to be impossible from the data set. Like this data source doesn't connect to anything. And third, you have to also, one thing that I really focus on too is someone's tone when they're talking. And just like my tone, where you can kind of harp on their pain points, where you can hear like if they're engaged with you, because you should know if someone has tuned out because you're being way too technical. And I've seen this unfortunately too many times, early, and still sometimes, if I didn't gauge who I'm talking to, where they're tuned out because this is too much, they're overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And there's no connection there. So all of that goes back to, from a communication side, of not just being able to use effective words, but also that ability of like, how is someone perceiving you? Are you instilling confidence? Because honestly, most often than not, that's the role that someone's asking us to be.
I think those are really good points. And also I think why we recommend that people learn how to speak, right? Whether or not you want to hit the conference circuit is entirely up to you. Many people don't. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be front and center in a meeting of 20 people,
Right.
where you're the one that has to talk. And the way I think about the processes that you have to go through to be a speaker are the same things that you can start with when you're going to go ask somebody a question.
100%.
Right? What before you go ask somebody a question, do you sit down and visually have or visualize that conversation with the person, to walk through the steps of your problem, to have them understand it so they can solve it for you? Because going through that process, I can guarantee you 75% of the time when I've done it, I go, oh my gosh, I just figured this out, because I broke it down to a level that they would need to understand. And I figured out where my problem was because I thought about how I go from point A to point B and effectively communicating where my struggle is with that person. In the same way, when we're talking with audiences, it just kind of accelerates that process. How do you it accelerates it and it lets you focus. So when you're prepping for a presentation, it is you're diving deep into a topic because you want to not only articulate it well, you want to be able to answer any question that the audience may have. And that's why they say, speakers know like if they're speaking on a topic, they know that topic real well because they've invested a lot of time or they should have
They better.
on that area so that they can be comfortable talking about it. In the same vein, though, when you're going through that presentation building, you're doing those same steps. How do I break this topic into a conveyable object, right? How is the audience or who is my audience? That's why you have like levels in thing 100, 200, 300, like 100. These people don't know anything about Power BI. So you need to explain every different level before you start talking about facts and dimensions and star schemas or
Right.
measures or how that's different from a calculated column, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in a 400, you can assume that these are highly technical people that understand like all of these concepts and you don't need to explain them. But you're doing the same things in a larger setting that you would do in the business, right?
Mhm.
Go through these processes, figure out what you want to say, and form that thought before trying to deliver it.
I'm gonna have to digest that one a lot, but I love that.
So I think as we kind of like wind down here on the conversation, I think there's actually probably a good maybe some final thoughts we can kind of put through for the conversation here, and maybe go through and kind of what would be, and I'm thinking for people who want to get more involved or want to improve their communication skills, like what are some maybe tangible things that either we've done or things that we've found successful that have kind of helped us in our career. And I'm not saying we're experts at communicating. I think we've spent a good amount of time learning to try and do certain things. I think there's always ways we can improve. But what would be maybe one insight or one final thought around here's something that I would recommend to newer users or people who are wanting just to improve their communication skills? Seth, you maybe have a final thought or a wrap up of like for that new person or that one who wants to get better at communicating?
Yeah, I'd probably take my previous thought, right? Think through things first,
Agreed.
in your own mind to clearly articulate them, and then the only other add on to that would be join a pug group because I would always highly recommend people do take opportunities to do like 15-minute presentations and have an audience critique them and give them
Mhm.
positive feedback of like, how are you presenting? Like just because you're delivering doesn't mean that's the way people are consuming that information, right? Which is why, to your point, Mike, reiterate, like in the one-on-ones, reiterate what somebody is
Yeah.
saying. But when you're in a position of speaking to 10 or 15 people and explaining things, you want to make sure that you're coming off the way you think you are. And those are fantastic opportunities. And I wish people took advantage of it more often.
Tommy, what would be
Yeah.
your final thought or your kind of roll up of how do we get better?
Start a podcast.
Oh,
So, no, well, honestly, I would say I'll kind of give two things. One of the biggest things that honestly has helped me is the recordings. Like we've been doing the podcast. There's been a lot of talking, but I've also been recording a lot of the meetings that I have. Since a lot of them are obviously done on Zoom and Teams,
sure.
I'm making sure they're recorded. There's no better critique out there than yourself usually.
Yep.
And when you hear go, oh my gosh, like, and that's all I can do. Like I can't get through one meeting recording and listening to myself and go, oh, like, and just like, why did you say that? And even do the same thing with our podcast. Like this has honestly helped me slow down a little,
Yep.
Communicate, but also comprehend what someone's saying and also try to get my thoughts across in an effective manner.
Hmm.
So I would say that would be one of the biggest things because feedback is huge.
Yep.
From your own self, understanding what are you actually, and it's the hardest thing to do too, to hear yourself.
Agreed.
I would say that. And then the last point is when you have meetings and your boss is involved, ask for their feedback, for their honest feedback. Like, how was that? How do you think I did? Do you think we got the point across? that is huge because you can have your own thoughts, but I think having your boss, if you're comfortable doing that, is absolutely huge. My boss has given me some amazing advice, and I'll end on the biggest thing that I really have taken to heart is know the questions someone's going to ask before they ask them, and then answer it.
Sure.
And so I think that kind of sums up everything we've talked about. So
I love those thoughts.
So I would say, for those of you who are trying to start out, I would recommend going to find some. There's a lot of speaking type engagements that you can kind of start getting yourself introduced to. I would say find a low, not threshold, a low, an unthreatening environment to start practicing some of these skills. I think in this case, doing it over and over again, having areas where you can record yourself or see your recorded speaking, how you speak and what you talk about helps you refine yourself. I think after the podcast, we go through and say, man, there's a lot of ums and ands and whatever this way. Take your time. And one advice that I give to people who are doing speaking things, particularly presentation stuff for video, for one, is if you don't know what you're going to say, instead of using those stop words, those ums words, and I still do it, it's hard to get rid of all of them altogether, but take a pause. It's okay to let yourself sit there and think for a moment to collect your next thought and then put that together and then speak it. It's as long as you don't take 5 minutes to think about the things, I think it's fine there. So I would also recommend find a user group, a Power BI user group that you would like to get involved with, people that are other people who are passionate about what you do. Our user group has a standing open area inside time, right? We will more than happily allocate 5, 10, 20 minutes, whatever you're willing to share to the user group. If you found something that was insightful, a couple key thoughts you'd like to communicate about what you learned, do it. Take the opportunity. Jump on a call and talk to the people and get engaged that way and try to start honing those communication skills. I think my last word of advice would be is there's actually really good classes that you could take around communication. This is not a new topic. There's a lot of stuff out there. I'd recommend really investing some dollars around spending some time finding a class or something you can do to go communicate. I would say for me, it was very awkward to go through the class because I was uncomfortable. But I think putting yourself in a position where you're uncomfortable also means you're starting to learn and grow a little bit too. Because if I already knew how to do it, then I'd be totally comfortable and it would be just fine. And I'd have no problem just communicating what I'm trying to communicate. So I think Toastmasters is one that is kind of all over the place. You can pretty much find them anywhere. And there's other, private companies or other companies that you can actually hire and bring in for your team, your organization to work with your communication. So I think as Power BI professionals, we are putting ourselves in places where people need our help, and we have to kind of really come with a training heart mindset on top of it. We're coming here to teach you what we know, and coming in arrogant gets no one anywhere. Like, I already know all this stuff. Why don't you know this yet? That's not helping anyone. So I think coming in with a very teachable, teacher kind of vibe really helps your story when you're trying to communicate to other people. And with that, I think we've kind of wrapped why communication is important. I think it's a good topic. Happy everyone's talking about it. And for those of you who like the podcast, we ask this every week if we can help, if we can. If you like this podcast and you know someone else who might find some value from it, please just share it with one other person this week. Let them know, hey, this is an interesting podcast. Mike's a goofball, Tommy's funny, and Seth has all the insights. So, let them know. Let them know this is an interesting podcast and share with somebody else. Tommy, where can we find the podcast?
So if you're listening to this podcast right now on a podcast platform, you can join the live conversation every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central in YouTube and LinkedIn. If you're watching it right now, make sure to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, anywhere you listen.
Well, thank you all very much. It's been a wonderful conversation, and we'll see you next week on Tuesday.